The genius of Earth Day is really a story of an event that is famous and yet remarkably little known. So everyone has heard of Earth Day. We still celebrate it, but the first Earth Day in 1970 had never been the subject of a book before. And although people recognized that it was important, they really thought it was important largely as a symbol. Millions and millions of people turn out on that day to show in all kinds of ways that they care about the environment, and that helps to launch an environmental decade of legislation and reform. But I found that the story was a lot more complicated than that. Earth Day isn't the beginnings of environmental activism by any means. There's already a long history, almost a century long, by Earth Day, of people grappling in one way or another with all the unintended consequences of our rapid growth, industrialization, urbanization, growth in numbers as a nation. What's new is a new urgency on the one hand. After World War II, we have many, many new technologies that create all kinds of new, in many cases, far larger in scale hazards than the old forms of pollution that may even ultimately threaten the very survival of humankind. And there's also, because of the post-war economic boom, a new willingness of newly affluent Americans to demand higher quality of life. They have some of the basic necessities. They're not just worried about the absolute minimum of food and shelter and clothing. Now they can really say, I want things to be nice. I really want to be able to enjoy what I have. And the combination of graver hazards, more far-reaching hazards, and a new willingness to say enough, we don't have to put up with this anymore, is the backstory that leads to Earth Day. Unlike some of the other major protests that came out of the other movements of the 60s, Earth Day really didn't have any predecessor. There were no earlier, smaller versions of Earth Day. Barry Commoner, a scientist, who 2 months before Earth Day was on the cover of Time magazine when they had a special issue on the environment. He speaks at a teach-in at the University of Michigan, environmental teach-in, in the basketball arena. There's 15,000 people there. No environmentalist had ever spoken to a crowd that big before. And for all these people, I think, individually, this forced them to think harder about how much they cared about these issues, what they were willing to do. They're articulating for the first time what they really think, or they're speaking to a more diverse audience, and they're stretched. Some became more personal and intimate. Some became more prophetic. But this really was an unprecedented national debate about environmental issues, that thousands and thousands and thousands of people suddenly participating, talking about things that very few people had talked about or even written about before. And the other thing that was astonishing to me about Earth Day, because there were so few experts, young people in particular could leap many, many rungs of what would normally be the occupational hierarchy and become experts. 20-somethings are speaking on Earth Day and then publishing books about what you can do to save the environment that are brought out in mass market paperback that sell 100,000 or more copies. All kinds of people come out of Earth Day with a very entrepreneurial sense that there's no obvious career paths for people interested in these issues. They're going to make careers. They're going to make niches because they're now committed. They weren't before. Many of them weren't even interested in environmental issues, but they become avid about it and dedicated. We don't trust our students as much as many of the people at the Earth Day generation did. That young people were absolutely critical, both to Earth Day itself and to the legacies of Earth Day. And a lot of that was because older people didn't stand in their way, and in many cases actively encouraged them. So many university presidents and high school principals and others really saying to young people, we trust you to use the skills and the knowledge that you have to really do something good, and they did.